with some different speakers. You need to be mute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet Committee Regeneration on Thursday the 9th of March, Thursday 9th of March. It says Thursday the 9th of March, February. It isn't. It's Thursday the 9th of March from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 2:01 p.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Cabinet Member for Asset Management. This meeting is being live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. If you are joining us online, please turn your camera and microphone off. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent? Can I remind members, please, to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome members of the public to the meeting this afternoon? When we get to public participation in the agenda, if you would like to come forward to the empty desk in front of you, the microphone is activated by pressing the large button on the base, and as you will know, you'll have 3 minutes to make your contribution. A timer will appear on the screen to show the time remaining. Turning to the agenda, the first item is apologies. I believe we have apologies from Councillor Cunningham. The second item is disclosures of interest. I need to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest as a county councillor. Does anyone else have any interests to declare? I have no requests to speak from councillors. On public participation, I have a request to speak on agenda item 7 from Timothy Montague from Orams Arbour Residents Association and Phil Gagg, the Chair of Winchester Action on Climate Change, Transport and Planning Action Group. And so I will call you to speak when we get to that item on the agenda. The next item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of February 2023. Colleagues, are those meetings agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item is Chair's announcements. I don't have any particular announcements to make at this meeting. That brings us to item number 7, the station approach project. So the order I will run this in is I will say a few words. I think then Ms. Taylor will make a presentation. Good. And then we will take 2 public deputations and go forward from there. So just to confirm where we are. So we laid out an approach last year where we said how we were going to consult and what we were going to consult on, the pieces of work that we're going to be doing to move this project ahead. And effectively, that is what we have done. There has been a full and inclusive piece of initial stakeholder engagement, and we also have other work in the pipeline, such as the capacity study and other technical works that are needed. But the main focus of today's meeting is the result of the consultation work, initial consultation. I have had a written deputation, a written email from Cycle Winchester, highlighting that they wish that the references to cycling were more explicit. That's certainly the intention and what's in the main paper, but I think that's something that Ms. Taylor will be addressing in her presentation. There's a reason why we're taking a careful approach to make sure we have the right understanding at the start of this project, the right insight as to what should be the content of this project. There's a general consensus The biggest problem with the previous attempts on station approach was in practice the brief. So understanding the constraints we're under, understanding the challenges we face and the opinions of the public before we start defining exactly how this is going to work or what the priorities should be, above and beyond the development principles, was the way that we wanted to do this, to make sure that when and if we take this project forward in more detail, we're taking it forward with a really sound base that reflects local people's views and a thorough and coherent analysis of the situation we're in. But the main thing we're here to talk about today is the results of that initial consultation. So, Ms. Taylor, could you please take us through the presentation?
Right. Thank you, Chair. As said, the presentation that I'm about to give outlines the methodology and the results of the initial stakeholder engagement and consultation that was undertaken between the period of August and October of last year. Following the Cabinet decision in July 22 that approved a number of work streams and actions to take forward the Station Approach project, including the stakeholder communication engagement strategy and programme for this first piece of public engagement. Just to reiterate that we are at the start of the process of refreshing the Station Approach project. If the project does go forward, it will take many years to come to fruition. And just to sort of show we're at the start of the process, autumn and winter last year, we've done the initial consultation and we've been undertaking some technical studies and a capacity study, and we'll be coming back later in the summer with the results of that. But today we're here to talk about the engagement results. Just to remind ourselves, this is on 4 sites, 2 that are owned by the council, the Carfax site and the Cattle Market and Worthy Lane sites, and then 2 that are owned by Network Rail, and they're to the east of the station, the multi-storey car park there, and to the west, the multi-storey car park and the surface car park. The red line that we're showing at the moment is a sort of a fluid red line, if you like, depending on the results of the consultation. If we have other landowners that want to come forward and be part of a wider scheme, then we can consider that as well. And I've highlighted here number 5, which is a Ministry of Defence owned land, because it's a public owned land. In terms of our engagement strategy, last year we had the expertise of Meeting Place Communications commissioned to help us develop our strategy and also to help us in the delivery of the strategy and that initial first engagement. And at the very heart of the strategy are 3 core principles. The first, to have early and meaningful engagement to better understand the concerns and aspirations of those living and that have a stake in the area. Inclusive engagement to make sure that we reach out as far as possible and hear as many voices as we can, and to help us shape the proposals that we would develop if we take the project forward. And continued engagement throughout. So this is the very start of a process, but the first conversation, there will be engagement throughout every key stage of the progress going forward. In terms of the different communication methods that we used within the consultation, we started off with some member briefings in June of last year prior to going live on the consultation. We set up a website specifically for Station Approach, which holds project information and is also used as a tool to gather feedback and to keep people informed of next steps. Linked to that, there is an interactive map where people could make comments and like and dislike things about the area, which proved very popular in the consultation process. We also delivered a newsletter to all households and properties within a half-mile radius of the station, and that included the survey form that was also on the website. There was media coverage through Hampshire Chronicle before, during and after the consultation event, and also the local radio station covered the consultation events. We ran a social media campaign which reached out to more than 75,000 people. And we did in-person events for those people that didn't want to engage digitally or wanted to come and talk to members of the team in person. One at the station itself, and then also in the high street. And we also did some other in-person events, 2 pop-ups at the University of Winchester to speak to students and staff on the campuses. And we also had a number of one-to-one meetings with stakeholder groups and presentation to the Winchester Bid Board. The breakdown of the feedback form was split into 3 sections. So there was a section on multiple choice questions, a quantitative section. And then more qualitative, so there was free text for people to give sort of further views and creative suggestions. And then there was a map for people that didn't want to use the online map, so they could annotate things that they wanted to impress upon the project team. Key facts, we ran from the 1st of August to the 23rd of October. We extended it initially from the September time to make sure that we went beyond the summer holiday period. There was over 1,000 responses received during that period, combined of online surveys, returned paper surveys and interactive map comments. And the pop-up events were well attended. And I think I can say that I thought the programme was well received, and there was certainly an appetite from people that I spoke to that want to be involved further and help shape any future proposals. So who responded to the survey? So in terms of people that wanted to say what gender they were, slightly more women than men, but fairly well balanced. Slightly geared towards the over 75s in age terms, and 10% of those that responded identified themselves as disabled, and the majority of people were residents of Winchester. Prior to going out to the consultation, we developed some development principles, and this was jointly with Network Rail and London Development LCR, and we did this so that there was a guiding principle for our capacity study, and we wanted to know if we'd got these right. And we asked people what they thought about these principles. Overwhelmingly, people supported them, over 90% across all of the 4 principles. But where people did feel that needed a little bit more work, we had comments like they thought they were a bit mother and apple pie, that why wouldn't you agree with them? That they needed to either be in more plain English or we needed to give a little bit more explanation, and to be perhaps a little bit more succinct. And there was also a call that particularly in the connected sustainable development principle, that we reflected the priorities of the Winchester movement strategy. So if the project goes forward, we will be re-looking at these development principles for when we would look to develop a master plan, and as we're creating a vision for station approach. Moving on to the quantitative questions that we asked, we were interested to know how people travel to or through the area, and walking was by far the most popular mode of transport. There were 69% of people saying that they did this always or very often, and that was even higher when you broke it down further, looking at the younger demographic, 77%. Car usage was still very popular, 45% saying using very often or always, and also train usage popular. Next, we wanted to know if better facilities were required for these modes of transport in the area, and 82% chose pedestrian improvements as important or very important, very much in line with the previous question of how people came through the area. But this was followed most closely by bicycles, with 65% of people saying better facilities needed to be provided for people using bikes. And whilst car usage was quite high, improvements for cars was not seen as a priority. And then in terms of the bus facilities for bus, also asked for support, with the least popular choice was the motorbike. And then we talked about the better facilities within public and shared spaces. And it was very clear from the answers that came back that trees and green spaces are very important to people across all age groups. And better wayfinding is required, and benches, particularly with the over 65s. Better street lighting, also a concern, and also greater amongst the younger age group. We looked next at the different commercial uses that would be appropriate across the site, what people thought if we had commercial, what type of commercial. And cafes, restaurants and food stores were well supported, as were co-working spaces and general retail. And in terms of residential, if there was to be housing on the sites, there was support for affordable housing, and with student accommodation that was better supported amongst the younger age group, with market rate apartments supported sort of evenly across all. And when we moved on to the qualitative section, we had a lot of comments, which was great, but too many for me to outline this afternoon, unfortunately. But so the key messages that I wanted to bring forward were the residents really want the station area to reflect, look and feel the history and the rest of the city. So that heritage really coming through strongly. The fact that when you arrive at the station, it's the first impression that people get of the area, and it needs to be a welcoming gateway. Also, whilst it's a very important transport hub, people live there. And it needs to be an area that also has a social and community hub for friends and families, not just somewhere that you pass through. Accessibility for all was a really strong area that came out, making accessible for all forms of transport and stressing the connectivity that the station approach area has, and sustainability. And then another key area that came across was about safety. and that the area really needs to function in a way that people feel safe in the area. Looking at the sort of highlights across all of the results that came back from surveys and conversations that we had with members of the public, it was clear, as we said, there was support for development principles. The history needs to be reflected within the area. That greater sense of arrival I spoke about, creating more and better ways to feel safe, and particularly if we want people to use public transport more and stop using their car, then there needs to be facilities to make people feel safe, and better lighting and shelters, for instance. Also, concerns expressed for people with disabilities to make sure that they can access the area, and there was points made about making sure that we do have drop-off and pick-up points at the station for people with disabilities. And then most people wanted improved routes for both cycling and walking throughout, as well as improvements in bus services. As well as making sure that any new development doesn't impact erroneously on Winchester's heritage, it also is important for people that we consider the environmental impact that any development would have. Another point was raised that people would like to see more local independent businesses occupying some of the commercial spaces if that was available. The trees and green spaces I've already mentioned, but we need to make sure they can be protected as much as possible. Residential, a mix of uses in the area, just to reiterate, clear preference for affordable housing and some support for students. In terms of workspace, respondents, particularly the businesses, expressed an interest in modern and flexible spaces rather than the sort of opposed to traditional office space. And there was also a concern raised by quite a few people that the council should finish other major projects in the district before embarking on any new ones. So we need to take that into account. And then my last point is again about safety, and particularly many women had expressed that they don't currently feel safe using public transport in this area. So it's something we need to address. So how would we use this feedback? Well, it's really helped us to give us a picture about the constraints and opportunities identified for the area, and that has fed into the capacity study that we're currently undertaking. I also wanted to mention that we've had a number of detailed comments that are more relevant to the next stage of the project if we go on for master planning, because they're very much about design. So where would we put e-charging, for instance, points. So all those will be handed over to the new project team should we decide that the project is going forward. So just to make sure that you know, nothing's going to be lost. Everything is very valuable. And we also got some comments that were outside the scope of this particular project, but again, very important points. So they've been fed to the relevant people across the council and Hampshire County Council where that's appropriate. So just in conclusion, we've completed the first phase of the engagement, sort of emphasising the council's commitment to putting people before we develop plans. I think we've received a good level of engagement, but obviously we can always do better, and we will next time. And we've created a database of people that want to be kept informed of the project. We've learned valuable information to explore the regeneration options for the sites, and to re-emphasise that this is an ongoing dialogue, and to thank people that have participated so far, and helping us to form a basis for considering whether we've got a project here. In terms of next steps, our anticipation is to go to Cabinet in July with our strategic business case, which will set out whether we think that there's a project to take forward. We're finishing off the capacity study and viability work this month, and then we'll start writing that business case. We'll be coming back to this committee in June with the results of that work, and we'll be also doing an open forum in June so that we can have that wider discussion with the public. And before we take the paper to Cabinet, it will be scrutinised in early July. I'll hand back now. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. That was extremely helpful, Ms. Taylor. The next section of this meeting is deputation. So can I ask Timothy Montague to come forward from Warham's Harbour Residents Association? And you have 3 minutes, which will appear on the screen.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Emma, for those points. I'd firstly sort of start off by saying that I've had, this is not a formal response from the Warham's Harbour Association. It's just an informal sharing of views amongst the committee. I think many of those views are echo what has been put forward, especially aspects regarding sort of history, heritage in the area, public transport, cycling, walking, electric charging points, trees, green spaces, and street lighting. And just to tick off a few points there, I think that's great to hear that those are part of the initial discussions, and I think should be taken forward. I've had some helpful comments from Kate McIntosh and Liz Kessler, who know this project on a longer term, and I get a sense there's a significant amount of work that's already been done, using excellent architectural practices. I think the design engine team were part of that and have done a lot of work and are very knowledgeable. So there was sort of thanks from the community for the work that has gone on. And I think the feeling of not wanting to lose momentum. I mean, if you step back a bit, that part of the reason people live in, thousands of people in this area and in the villages need the station for connection to the national railways. So I want to sort of stress the point about how important this area is to improve it. And one aspect is the connection from the station to the high street. And there was a question raised about whether the council has considered restoring two-way traffic on Sussex Street, downgrading the Upper High Street and Newburgh and Gladstone streets from their current function as part of the link road, basically trying to enable people to walk from the station past the Upper High Street and through the Westgate, which is the attractive way to walk between those two places, to try and strengthen that link. So I think that needs looking at. There was a question on office need, clearly post-pandemic. Do we need more office space when plenty of offices stand empty in Winchester? That needs consulting, but I could see that certainly there may be a justification for sort of London offices having a sort of satellite offices in regional centres like Winchester and having a sort of co-working spaces. So that should be explored. Just to touch on a couple of points, things like the Cadet Force building was mentioned, and I'm a strong supporter. Worked in the forces for 10 years, but yes, I've long felt that building should be moved to somewhere less of a prime position. And lastly, I'd want to mention the empty offices on the Cromwell Road, the former Den Plan and HMRC offices. Has the council worked with the owners of those buildings to try and redevelop them and incorporate them into this scheme? Because some of them stand empty. I think I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll make sure we come back to all of those questions after I've heard the second deputation from Phil Gagg. But thank you very much indeed.
I'm waiting for the
Mr. Gagg, far away. Yes, we'll start.
basic bit of software. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to say a little bit. I'll try and get through it. Now I've got a clock. We welcome the approach taken by this paper, in particular the link drawn between this initiative and decarbonising travel. We worry, though, that the significance of this is understated, even in this paper. What happens here will be central to all transport decarbonisation in the whole district. This is the only effective place to put a transport interchange in. Without it, there'll be insufficient mode transfer to public transport, walking and cycling. Low carbon substitutes for energy hungry private transport will fail unless there is a comprehensive door-to-door journey provision relying on good connectivity. A transport interchange anywhere else will not be viable. We cannot move the railway. This is our one big chance. A good interchange is more than a few marginal bus stops and the National Highways turquoise mobility hub pole. There must be provision for two-way interchange between all train and bus services following the Swiss TACTFAR plan model. This will require a considerable space allocation and good timetable, as well as good walking and cycling access. We need to revisit the movement strategy with this in mind. Planning for mini Hollands, walking and cycling routes, allocating space in this development, and discussion on transport access to the central Winchester regeneration area must all be coordinated and aligned. The site must be designed to ensure easy access to the town centre. The lessons in Appendix A are clear, and I'm very pleased that the presentation is clearer than the written report. 82% of the respondents wanted pedestrian improvements, 65% bikes, 62% bus improvements, and only 36% wanted car improvements. It was a pity in the original report that the bikes issue was ignored. If under 35s were underrepresented, the samples should have been boosted, and hopefully you can do that in future. So, with 9 seconds left, we hope you will make sure this scheme will deliver what people have said they want, and I think it will be very difficult to reduce the complexity of surveys to a simple recipe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for both of those sets of comments. Some important questions there, and I hope committee colleagues will forgive me if we go through those first, and then before moving on to wider questions from committee members. So the first question, I'm not going to take everything, but the first question related to making Sussex Street two-way. I know that that is something where the county has been doing some public consultation with residents in the local area. Is this project tied into that? Are we aware of where that stands at the moment? Obviously, I'm the county councillor for the area, so I know a bit about it. And Councillor Lerney is the lead on the movement strategy and probably also knows a bit about it. But Is that something we're mindful of in managing the project?
We are aware that the consultation is taking place, and we're working closely with our colleagues at Hampshire County Council to make sure that the Station Approach project is linked into their not only the Winchester Movement Strategy, but what plans Hampshire County Council have as well. So this is certainly something that we are aware of, and we'll be keeping a close watch on, enabling people to walk more attractively into the city and find their way has come up many times during my conversations that I've had with people of better wayfinding, but also changes to that two-way would help that as well.
Good, thank you. I believe there's also still community infrastructure levy reserved for that. There may be a point that we get hold of the timeline and map it against ours and make sure that the two work together. Second point from Mr. Montague related to, do we need office space when plenty of office space stands empty?
As part of our technical work, we had some market analysis done to see if there's still a need for office space in Winchester, and there very much is from the research that's come forward. Also, our colleagues at the bid have reiterated that to us. But I think it's important to say that it's not the office space that we think of sort of pre-COVID. It is the more co-working and new ways of working that are required in terms of providing office accommodation. Whilst people are sort of working at home, sometimes when they're coming into the office, they want a real pleasant place to come. They want a cafe environment. They want meeting space. It's not just these wide floor spaces that were in previous previous life, and the reason that a lot of office space remains empty in the area is because it's not the office space that people want now, and so does need to be repurposed. I don't know if Councillor Thompson wants to add to that.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Yes, I'm on the bid board and go to their meetings on a monthly basis, and they are incredibly interested in this project because time and again I hear that the office space that we do have in Winchester is not the right configuration, and they're looking for different types of office space now. So in the past we used to call it grade A office space. I think it's now just high quality office space rather than distinguishing it from grade A or anything else. The office building that I think Mr. Montague talked about, Cromwell House, as far as I'm aware, I don't know whether Ms. Taylor has anything to say about this, but certainly I know Network Rail were looking at that building and have made inquiries, but I don't know anything else any further on that.
Quickly touch on that question. There were sort of three sets of buildings that were mentioned: the Cadet Force building, the Denplan building, and Cromwell House, and I just wondered how they had been factored into discussions.
There are discussions that are ongoing with Ministry of Defence to see if they are interested in coming into the scheme, and approaches have been made to the owners of the other buildings. That's all I can say at the moment, Chair.
Thank you. There was then this discussion about the point made by Mr. Gagg about what it means to be a transport interchange and what we need to do in order to sort of bring that to life. I just wondered if those conversations and the need for the movement strategy to represent that. Again, is that conversation going on? Are we having the conversation? I don't know if I doubt we've got to the point of discussing the TACTFAR plan model, but maybe we should be. So perhaps an update on that perspective.
Yeah, so those conversations are being had, and we do have a member of the movement strategy team on our project board. So they're sort of, we're working, you know, hand in glove with them. The point Mr. Gadd made about you can't move the railway station, I mean that's just spot on, and we do need to make this an effective transport interchange, and I think we need to do a bit more work on what exactly that means. We have had a feasibility plan done for a mobility hub, but I don't think that goes far enough, and the project team are aware of that, and we are looking at that.
And then the last point to touch on was this point about how do we handle the fact that, as is not unknown in Winchester consultations, it's skewed, slightly old, and had fewer young people represented. I mean, I think we had a special chapter saying this is what the young people in the survey said, but is that how we handled it because of its nature?
Yeah, I mean, we were aware when we started analysing the data that there was a larger percentage of older people had engaged, despite the fact that we'd done special outreach to the university, etc. So to try and capture that, we did a sort of a deep dive into sort of the responses from the younger people. So that we've captured their views in this initial phase, and that's something that if we do progress with a master plan, we need to think a little bit more carefully about how we get the younger voice heard more within our consultation, and what we need to do to engage with younger people.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I hope the deputies feel that we've covered most of the key points they raised, but if there are other points you'd like followed up, then we can talk about them later. Committee colleagues, do you have any questions that you would like to ask in terms of what we've just heard? Lots of hands going up. Councillor Nerney first, maybe.
Thank you. As part of his initial remarks, the leader mentioned the problem with the previous scheme's brief. Clearly, we need to have a properly defined brief which will put active travel, including cycling and public transport, front and centre to it. So how are we incorporating that brief development into the other work streams that have been mentioned today?
That will form part of the developing the strategic outline case, so that we've got sort of our ingredients, if you like, of what we want to take forward in a master plan. The word master plan gets bounded around quite a bit, and means different things to different people, and I think that's where the sort of developing the brief for the consultants, if we decide that we want to take that forward, is really important. I also think we've talked a lot about our desire to co-create, and that again is a bit of a buzzword nowadays, that everyone's co-creating, but what does that actually mean? And that, to me, that means involving stakeholders and collaborating with stakeholders in the development process, and moving on to a design process, not just sort of doing it and then saying what do you think about it, but having them integral to the process, and that would mean helping shape the brief as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Taylor talked in her presentation about a very good level of consultation responses we had. I think that's always been the case with the station approach proposals. If they've come forward, we've always gained a lot of interest. But she also highlighted the point which I shared and my colleagues shared, that we didn't challenge the consultees to think about things they didn't want. And I think we did have lots of motherhood and lots of apple pie, or more motherhood, more apple pie, but no greater cost or higher buildings or closed streets or other things which people perhaps respond negatively to. So what did it really tell us? What do we know now from following that consultation, which we didn't know following the positive and negative feedback we had 6-7 years ago?
I think that what's been really interesting is that there are certain things that were confirmed, if you like, from what we know before, particularly around the heritage, the heights of the buildings and so on. But for me, there was some key things like the safety issue that came out, which had never been mentioned before, about people not feeling safe in the area, and then also in terms of sustainability, and we know from sort of talking to various people, you've got sort of on one hand you've got people that saying we don't want any cars, get rid of get rid of all the cars, and on the other hand you've got people that need the cars and rely on the cars. So we've got a lot finer grain of information about both from both sets of people, and that's an evidence base that I don't think we had before. Also, this time we engaged with Network Rail and LCR that weren't involved in the previous scheme, and the aspirations that people had around the station and their sites as well. So it's a lot broader this time round from the previous consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
There we go. Thank you, Alida, and thank you very much, Ms. Taylor, for your presentation today. I actually live in the vicinity of Station Approach and of this project, and I was really delighted with the level of consultation that I had as a resident in this scenario than previously. Not only did I see adverts, not only did I see something pop up on my Facebook feed, but I also got a letter with the consultation and I could respond. That's very different to what happened 6 or 7 years ago, so I thank you for that. I was also delighted when I received a letter updating me recently about the consultation, telling me what was happening next, telling me how I could get involved as a resident. So all of that, thank you for doing that. So to me, the consultation is different, notwithstanding your response to Councillor Godfrey that you've just given. I just had a couple of questions. We talk about this word co-creation, and we talk about wanting to involve the community and to listen to them. But sometimes there's a tension between what people tell us they want and what we can deliver, given that the scheme has to be viable. And I noted in the results of the consultation that when we looked at the commercial uses, what respondents were telling us was there was very little support in many ways for office buildings. When they were talking about commercial uses, they were talking about restaurants and shops and something different. So I wonder how we align or how we allow for those two different perspectives when we come to the capacity study. The second point, again, around the capacity study, was that issue of safety. Now, I used to travel down from UCL in London. I used to get home from work at 10:30 in the evening. So I very much understand that feeling of safety around the station late at night. I used to choose to come out of the station at the front, walk through the tunnel, which was lit, to walk home, rather than walk through the station car park. So for me, it's a big issue. I absolutely understand this. I don't think I responded with that in my response, but having seen it, perhaps I should have done. So the issue for me is when we have something like safety, how again do we allow for that when we come to doing something like capacity study? How is that taken into account? The two related issues around the capacity study, and thank you for that very different consultation on this particular scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Aligning expectations, balancing expectations is always a tricky art, and we want a scheme that gets majority of support, but it has to be viable. Otherwise, it won't get off the ground. So. My approach to sort of co-creation is always being honest and upfront about what you can deliver and what you can't. So this is the start of a process in terms of feeding back what we've heard from people. The next stage in developing the capacity study is looking at how it can be built up, taking into account all the comments and views that we've heard, and where things can't feed in, to be honest about why they can't. You know, we can't tick off everybody's wish list. Like life's not like that. But to get the best possible scheme is to see what we can achieve and say what we can't, why we can't. In terms of the commercial expectations, a lot of the things that people have said that they would like, such as the cafes and the restaurants, for instance, could be built into a commercial scheme. If we need to, you know, if we decide that a co-working scheme is right for that area, then in terms of ground floor uses and building in some of those things that people are asking for could be accommodated within that.
Sorry, can I just ask you to address that safety issue? How we accommodate things like that?
The safety issue is one in terms of I think more design. So in terms of the capacity building study, where we're really looking to see if we can achieve you know, is there a scheme that could be developed? I think the safety issue is more a topic to be incorporated within the master plan. However, in terms of sort of connecting the site as a whole and looking at what type of buildings you put on the site, where you would position them, making sure that you've got natural surveillance, as it were. So in terms of the capacity study, there's a little bit, you know, it can be given thought, but in terms of the actual design itself, that would come into the master planning stage.
And if I could just add through you, Chair, I mean, we need to be very clear that the capacity study is not a master plan or even an emerging master plan, but in undertaking this initial process, what we have been doing is making sure we take account of the concerns which were raised at the time of the previous scheme, but also the views of those we've gone out to consult. And one of those things is what they don't want to see as a sort of whole load of monolithic development or overscaled. So of course we've been taking that into account in terms of the advice we've been given to the consultants to actually break up the blocks, and to that extent we've asked them to think about permeability and effectively the spaces between buildings in generalities. So we are starting to think about that and to make sure that how can I put it? We don't end up with a capacity plan which is viable, but at the same time is going to cause problems further down the line. So we are thinking about safety in general terms, and to make sure that we're safeguarding that for the next stage of the project, if members decide to progress with that, when we get to start preparing a master plan.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to pick up on a point that Mr. Gagg raised in terms of a transport hub, effectively, in the area. And if I look at the results of the survey and the way people currently travel to and through the station approach area, it's predominantly walk and car are the ways to get there. But if you look at what the aspiration is going forwards, it includes bikes and e-bikes as well as walking and significantly less car. So my question really is how the project team will handle the slow, I think it will be, but eventual change from different modes of transport. So with the best will in the world, I can't see a complete bike infrastructure being in place to allow people to cycle into that area in line with any of the development plans that we might put forward. So, you know, we've got the Winston movement strategy, we've got the bidding for the Mini Holland funding as well, which will enable more bikes to travel into the area, enable people to walk more, and enable ultimately for us to run a better public bus service as well. So my question is, how do you build the case today on today's model where you've got to make the capacity for cars coming into that area when the actual outcome that we want eventually is many fewer cars, with the transport being more aligned to active travel? And how do you phase that over time when you look at this project going forwards? So how do you manage that transition? Because you're going to start in one place, but you want to end up somewhere else.
Thank you. Really good question. It is a long-term project. It is going to take many years to come to fruition, and that means different phases. So we can look at what we can do today, and then what we can do over time. So, for instance, if we were to start with one site and reduce car parking on that site, we would be sort of reducing the car capacity and sending a very clear message that we want people to use other sustainable modes of transport. There's also got to be the facilities to help people use and switch to those sustainable modes of transport. So if we talk about bike, there was a lot of really useful suggestions that came forward through Cycle Winchester, through the Community Rail Partnership I spoke to, through WINAC, Sustrans, in terms of when we're designing schemes around station approach, making it step-free, free access, making sure that there are e-charging points, making sure there is secure cycle storage. And there's been some cycle storage recently put in on the west of the station, which has been really well received. And I think whilst you wouldn't put the infrastructure fully in on day one, you need to put some infrastructure in to get people to over time change. There's also, in terms of so we're working with the Winchester movement strategy, and the work that they're looking at doing to improve sustainable methods of transport. I think we also need to look at the charging of tariffs within the car parking structure to again discourage people from using the car in the city centre. So it's not just one thing that the project will do. It'll be a plethora of actions over a period of time.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Godfrey wanting another question. Was it?
If I may, there are one question coming up out of this car park issue and another about going forward on business case, but perhaps I'll deal with the issue which Ms. Taylor raised just there and in the presentation. And the consultation did raise the issue of different groups having different desires. There are twice as many people responding to the survey who want more car parking than want less car parking. Overall, the council is aiming to reduce the number of cars coming into the city centre. So we're going to have to find that balance and achieve that. But more importantly, we have to meet the needs of our partners. And I really want to understand what the current understanding of the rail partners was in terms of their car parking and their desire to move people away from cars towards other forms of transport to reach their hub, and how that can be reconciled with the council's aspiration to reduce the amount of cars coming into that area of the district.
Ms. Taylor, I think we are taking, if it's just, we are taking a holistic view of the parking questions in that part of the city, aren't we? But you can probably tell us more.
Yeah, so we're working with Network Rail to understand their requirements. I mean, currently their requirement is that they would maintain their car parking. Their number one priority is customer satisfaction, and to also sort of have a balanced sheet. So there's a national policy at the moment that they don't reduce their car parking, but as Leader said, we're looking holistically at all our sites collectively to see what the demand is across the piece, and what needs to be provided for residents and businesses today, and how that may change over time.
And just for clarification, because I think it's useful, so we are looking at the two Winchester City Council car parks in the area within scope, and the two rail car parks, and also looking at what the potential impact might be of a North Park and Ride as well, presumably. Is that scope of the parking?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Leader.
We have a recommendation in front of us to note the report. So I don't think we'll necessarily be changing, I don't see any point in particularly changing the recommendations, because but I wondered if there were any particular points that people wanted, that colleagues wanted considered moving forward that you haven't touched on already, if there was anything else that people wanted to say. Otherwise, I'd be very interested in, shall we say, debate. Oh, you had another question, didn't you, Councillor Godfrey? I do apologise.
It comes on to exactly that point of what we would want to take forward by July, looking at the strategic business case, the outline business case. I wondered if we knew, if we could recommend or could suggest what the project is that we're trying to create a business case for, and how we define that in terms of car park numbers, the reduction in car park numbers, the number of residential units in each phase. What is the project that we're trying to deliver, and what's the scope? It was a point that was raised by Ms. Baines in a recent email. But we don't know what the scope of this project is yet, It's very early. How do we develop that scope and how will we define it? I think that's what would be useful. We must have that.
I think that's a very important question, because it's partly because we're doing this capacity study thing that I think is new to us all. We've not used on any studies recently, any projects, have we? And bringing these other factors together to tell us what's possible. So I think part of what the output will be is based on everything we've heard. What are our options? Which we're not in a position to talk about today, because that extra bit of work is not at the stage where we could do that. Councillor Learning, I was about to hand it over to officers, but feel free to join in.
Thank you, Leader. We have actually produced capacity studies for other projects. As the previous asset management portfolio holder, I was involved in a number. Well, the point with capacity studies is they are around what's possible. So they give you that, they allow you to say what is and is not possible on particular sites. I think this comes back to my earlier question where I was exposing the importance of developing the brief, which obviously will need to include issues like exactly like this. How many parking spaces will we need? When will we need them? Because that phasing issue will definitely come into play. So I do think that co-creation of the brief will give us some of the answers around that, and clearly that needs to be done not only with stakeholders, but with reference to things like the movement strategy, other things like the district LC whip, which are coming forward. So there's a whole combination of factors which need to come into play, but that brief will, I think, be the critical document in terms of the direction forward.
If I understand the process, and in theory, since I'm responsible for this, I probably should. The outline business case. Firstly, the term business case is always very confusing, because it sounds like something that a lot of us might know from commercial life, which is actually normally just about the commercials and does this pay out or not. And this is the 5 strategic cases that the Treasury likes us to fill out, which looks at 5 different types, only one of which is the financial. One's financial, one's commercial, and then there are other ones that look at the wider benefits. But you need a business case for what it is you're proposing, and presumably that is what is being talked about here as the brief. The next gate is to say, here is a set of choices as to what will go where, when, and various other choices that we will be making at that stage. And here is the business case that says, and this is real, this can happen. You're not smoking dope and coming up with something that can never be implemented. Is that a fair summary? I'm sure you can explain it with more accurate and technical language than I can manage.
July, we'll bring what's called the strategic outline case, and that will effectively say we've done the base study and we've got some options that we think we can take forward, but we need some more work to enable us to reach a preferred option. So that will be the first strategic case, and that's the next key decision. After that will become what we call the outline business case, and that's when we start refining the finances and drilling down onto what's possible. And you'll go from a short list to probably 2 or 3 options that you would then take forward to a full business case. So the next gateway is a strategic outline case, which is saying we believe we've got a project here and we need to then develop it further.
Next stages on the journey, the narrowing down of the funnel, the steps that we take at every stage to move towards the sort of eventually there being something built and something implemented. Okay. Oh, another question, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader. I note in the paper that it says, obviously, currently we're working on the overall site in conjunction with Network Rail and LCR. It does say, though, we may come to a point where we say, actually, one of the options would be we develop an element, our elements of the site ourselves. That's where we may get to. That's what it says in the paper. When you're doing the outline business case, I'm assuming, though, that you're doing it for the whole site. We won't be looking at the second option of if we don't continue to work in partnership. Is that correct?
Yes, so currently we're working on the whole site. The strategic outline case is for the whole site. There'll be a series of recommendations that go with that, and depending what step we take and the decision that's made, it might continue to be an outline case for the whole site, or it could be one or more sites. So there's options there depending upon the results of where we get to in terms of viability and the discussions with Network Rail, whether they want to continue to work with us. At the moment, we're in that exploratory phase.
I know from a resident's point of view, people often talk about that master planning stage where we get to that big master plan. Where does that sit on this long process? Because it's hard for people to understand when you get to that point.
So part of the decision in July will be, do we want to progress to master plan stage? So if in July councillors take the decision that they want to progress with the project, then that would be the master planning stage, and we'd be looking to procure a master planning team at that point, and that would be the next big piece of work for the project.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Leader. So the Deputy Leader kind of stole half my question there about the partner, but I do have a little bit to add to it. So sitting around this table is nobody from Network Rail, but we're talking about the business case and outline business case going forwards. Now, presumably, Network Rail have aspirations for generating revenue off of their assets within this. How does the next step move forwards in terms of our business case and Network Rail's business case? Are they the same thing? Are they joined together? Is there a joint decision? I'm just interested how we work together as partners should we want to go forwards, and what the process is in that case, because there'll be two vested interests in this. Thank you.
So at the moment, we're working on the technical studies to get an understanding of whether there's a viable project to take forward collectively or not, or just on our own sites, one or more of the sites. Once we've got to that decision, and it's a decision that Network Rail will have to take itself, whether it feels that it's got a viable scheme for its sites, and then us for ours. And if they decide that they want to continue with us, then we'd need to develop a collaboration agreement which sets out sort of very clearly how we're going to work together, and the business case governance, whether we sort of twin track or it can be one of the same, will depend on their governance commitments that they've got to meet, as well as our own. Clearly, they do the 5 case model as well, so there's no reason why it can't be the same business case. But in terms of the supplementary report, it's obviously down to individual organisations. The collaboration agreement would set out what each party is putting into the project, and what each party would get out of the project, if there's sort of percentage of equity shares and so on. But obviously we're a long way off that yet.
I just follow that up slightly, Leader? So what I'm really interested in is that Network Rail at the moment drive their revenue from those car parks by the cars going in and paying their fees. And I know they've got other probably sublet with the garage there and so on. But I presume they're looking at the assets they got, and they may be thinking to do something other than car parking on those areas to generate revenue, building, for instance. And so my question is back to how do you put the two sets of assets together to get greater value from the whole? And therefore you have to look at the whole, therefore both partners need to look at the business proposition and the outline business case, or do you just keep them separate so that you've got two organisations only looking at their own assets? And that was kind of where I didn't quite follow how we moved to the next stage, working in partnership and agreeing an outline business case in isolation. It's got to be a joint thing, surely, if we're going to put the whole thing together and get the value of the whole, the greater value of the whole.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the sort of drivers for starting to work with Network Rail in the first place. But we thought that by working together, there'd be a better regeneration opportunity for the whole area, rather than we can just develop a site-by-site basis. But that's very much a property-led transaction, rather than getting the wider regeneration benefits. However, obviously, Network Rail need to be assured that they would be getting value out of the site to move forward. Just like ourselves, we might not be driven by the profit, but we need to ensure that it's affordable to the council.
And that's right, just to build on that, and the very simple answer is we're obviously looking at all the sites within the defined area, but of course we're not looking at the sites separately. Part of that exercise is looking at individual sites, but also as part of this process we are looking at all the sites as a whole to see, comes back to the point is which you've made, is there a larger project which would be worth taking forward or not?
Thank you, colleagues. I think we've explored this at some length and a very useful set of questions, which I hope also gives a bit of sort of suggestion for some areas to focus on and look at as the project moves forward from here. I'm not sure that we need to discuss the recommendations per se. I hope people feel that their key points and concerns have been raised. We do have an agenda item that we need to quickly touch on, which is the recommendations in front of us. We are being asked to note the outcome of the initial stakeholder engagement, including the high level of interest and support for the project, the results of the consultation on draft development principles, again demonstrating the support and the keen desire to continue to be involved in shaping any future potential developments as the project progresses, and noting that a future report will be received later this year incorporating the conclusions of the capacity study and other technical works undertaken into a strategic outline case setting out options for how this project may be progressed, which will be scrutinised prior to Cabinet. So those are what we're asked to note. Can I assume that we're all happy to note those? Thank you, and can I thank Ms. Taylor and the rest of the team for firstly running such a great consultation, which, as you know, we are using as a model within the organisation and more widely in terms of how we wish to have more conversations with the public and engage them, and all the other work that you're doing to drive this project ahead. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is the King's Walk Contract Award. And this is a paper that relates to the procurement aspects of the King's Walk project, which we have had highlighted and running for quite a long time. As everybody here knows, on Monday, we took the decision to pick a development partner for Central Winchester Regeneration. And the project is moving ahead. But as has always been planned, we will need some so-called meanwhile steps or interim uses ahead of the major planning applications and land transfer to the development partner. And what we can't do is let our assets and the site go backwards while we're waiting for the next stage. So we've actually got two papers that relate to this today, but the first one we're going to talk about is King's Walk. And ultimately, what this proposal in front of us is about is making sure that King's Walk continues to thrive, or thrives even more, shall we say, ahead of its redevelopment. The feedback that we've had from our development partners is that King's Walk is likely to be towards the end of the redevelopment programme. And while the final development delivery plan will be agreed later, it's prudent to plan on that basis. The issue we have is that the building is close to not being fit for purpose in its current state, and it's certainly not adequate for the next few years that we want it to stay open and in operation, and for the businesses that are based there to thrive. And the purpose of this plan is to address that. Now, as we all know, the world of construction has been a bit of a horror show recently, and that has had implications on the original procurement plan and what we're able to do within the budget. And this paper highlights how our procurement plan has had to be adjusted. The proposals that we're talking about today, they have been discussed with a potential development partner. They've been discussed with the tenants, and both support us going ahead and want, particularly the tenants, really want to see improvements in that area. One of the things I know from other bits of my life is that it is really important on big and complex projects to maintain momentum, to just keep moving ahead, which is what we know people want us to do for Central Winchester. There's Lions. I'm amazed that you're back in action after your tour de force last Monday, and it's very, yeah, 3 or 4 days ago. So
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back and taking us through, coming back and taking us through something on a slightly smaller scale, but actually as part of our overall direction of travel. Well, I won't say it's equally important, but it is definitely an important part of what we're trying to do to regenerate Central Winchester. So maybe if you could take us through the proposals.
Thank you, Leader. And as I say, the opportunity to come back before you is just wonderful. So where we are at is, members will previously, or hopefully remember, that we have already agreed the budget for King's Walk. We have already agreed the general scope of works and the proposals for King's Walk. We have been talking about this for a very long time. As the Leader has mentioned, we have been consulting with the tenants throughout the sort of evolution of time. We have also, in more recent weeks and months, been through the dialogue sessions talking with all three of the shortlisted bidders, and particularly now, since the decision on Monday, the recommended development partner. Spoke to them, in fact, only this morning about other bits and bobs, but words that they've used, Leader, totally supportive of showing our commitment as a council to all the things that we've been saying over the last few months and years, kickstarting the regeneration, making a statement, supporting the tenants. And I think words that they've used were to bring excitement, to revitalise and to re-energise. We've started that work and they're really keen to come in with us to build on it. And I think we are in a position now, having got the budget and the decision to make this happen, to actually crack on and do it. The issue that we had was going out to procure. We did hold a procurement process through a framework that actually we felt there was a little bit of interest in. We had a bidder day on site where potential interested parties came down. But at the close of that tender period, we received no bids for the work. So we went back to those bidders that had initially showed interest to find out why. Leader, you've already mentioned cost was a big one. The complexity of the scale of works was another, and literally the uncertainty in the market at the time was proving difficult. So having spoken to the procurement team within the council, other options were considered, and we have found through direct conversations a contractor that will come in to deliver the main elements of that work, to actually make sure that we carry through with the promises that we've been made. So we're seeking approval to award the contract and get going on the works, which can then happen really quite quickly.
Colleagues, do you have any questions on this particular paper and recommendations? Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee being asked to consider the unusual approach to procurement. I wonder if we also could outline what differences there are between the contract which you're being asked to confirm and that which was offered in the open tendering process. Has the single contractor who we're intending to offer this contract to being offered any terms which are different to that which was in the open tender process? That would be a question.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. The contract itself, the difference is this. We've done some benchmarking as well to make sure that we get value for money and we're not being sort of overcharged in the process of going direct to a contractor. So we've done some benchmarking work, and the reason we've managed to find somebody at this stage is that we have, through discussions, slightly reduced the scope of works that we had originally looked at, so that the contractor can deliver those works. But yes, to make sure that we're not being overcharged and do actually still receive best value, we have done a benchmarking exercise, and the contractor has supplied us with an estimate that is in line with that benchmarking piece of work that we've had done independently. So that's the difference, that the contract will remain the same, but it's the scope of works that through negotiations we have sort of talked to them about to get somebody interested.
Can I ask what has been reduced? What deliverable has been reduced?
Of course, we were planning with the original proposals to take the bin store out of the big loading bay at the back of King's Walk, relocate the bin store and make that into a short-term event space. And we were also looking to do more to the front of King's Walk than we have currently got. So King's Walk at the front is actually working really well. The tenants really like it. The whole atmosphere has changed. The antisocial behaviour in and around King's Walk is now no longer an issue, and I think that was becoming a real issue before. And also by doing this work through this procurement route means we can crack on with that really quickly, which means we do help support the tenants. We're not at risk at losing any of those tenants, which means we are not then at risk of having extra vandalism, extra antisocial behaviour on vacant properties that the council has a responsibility to maintain. We're seeing that across other council assets, and we really don't want that to happen at King's Walk. So basically it's additional works that we were going to do at the front and the loading bay at the back.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I was about to make the point in opening that Varian has just made about increases in security and access to King's Walk. As ward councillor, I've spoken with a number of businesses and also with the Nutshell Theatre, and I've heard just how much a difference that's made, and it's very welcome. And I think it has changed attitudes, so there's more hunger now for what's to come. However, I note that the scale of the works has been somewhat reduced, and as our leader said earlier, this is likely to be a solution that has quite a long life, with the redevelopment of that area being towards the end of the overall process. So I guess my question is it enough to sustain everything we want for X number of years? And are there perhaps parallel interventions which our new development partner might be making that would secure that?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. The main crux of the works that we had proposed are still going to be carried out. So there'll be the new lighting, new signage, new graphics, new branding. It will be a remarkable change. What our recommended development partner are looking at doing is, once we've carried out that work, to build on that, and then even maybe starting to look at opportunities to bring more of the building back into use. So the work that we're proposing is about the right level of intervention at this stage, but it doesn't preclude the development partner from coming in and then working with us to build on that and then make even more of that. Because, as we said, for those of you that were here on Monday, we're looking to start the process here, and we're looking to nurture those businesses with a view to then incorporating them into that longer term scheme. And the work that we're doing now absolutely shows our commitment and fundamentally that we're absolutely going to carry that through. And I think that's a really strong message that then the development partner will work with us to build on.
And Chair, I should say that the works which we're proposing are the works which the tenants really want. So they're the absolutely fundamental works which both we think are essential, as do the tenants. And the bits which are being dropped are, dare I say it, the bits which were nice to have, but not essential.
Thank you, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. I'm excited to see the continued improvement of King's Walk, not only for the antisocial behaviour but for the wider benefits it can bring. Having been in Winchester a very long time now, that part of Winchester used to be more vibrant when we had the antiques there upstairs above the Nutshell. It used to be a place that people moved through more freely. I know also that we've got residents who often speak to us about specifically that part of town in Middlebrook Street, that there's nowhere to sit, there's nowhere, there aren't any benches, there isn't anywhere to rest for a while. So again, I welcome this enlivening of that space and making it more usable. One of the questions I have though is, given that we know that it could be a little while for our development partner to sort of come on board and, well, not come on board, but to sort of get to that point of having a development plan and going to the next stage. We'd always hoped to be able to make more use of that space later in the day, because by 4:30 it is dead, the shops are closed. If you walk through there, it's very quiet. Do you envisage that these improvements in the meanwhile, in the interim, will actually enliven that space for longer in the day, and we can find other uses for it into the evening? Thank you.
Thank you. That is a really good point, Councillor Ferguson, because in recent conversations with the Nutshell, they do a lot of their activities and their sessions in the evening. And I think the one single thing that we can do to help improve just that factor, and again, it's going back to your safety factor, is the fact that new lighting and more activity in there will help that. And also the tenants at the front that are looking to roll out a programme of evening events. They do that anyway, quite often at the South Down Social. There's evening events, there's evening lectures. The Open House Deli, for example, also do evening sessions. And I think once we've made those physical improvements, we're also supporting them with helping them set up a King's Walk traders website, which will then help them promote all those activities. It will be a much nicer environment. People will feel much safer, and having an interest right the way through by redoing the signage, the lighting, having a point of interest at that back entrance will then help to draw people through by making it slightly more interesting just to explore. But when they get there, there will be more events going on because the tenants just want to come together to celebrate.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm really pleased to see this paper in front of us today. Only at the weekend was I speaking to a local businessman who asked me what was happening in central Winchester, as lots of people do, but also mentioned King's Walk in particular and said that over the years there'd been all sorts of plans. You know, there was a very grand plan that we had to do the work ourselves a few years back. And you know, those plans, because of the cost of living crisis and the situation we're all in with tighter budgets, they had to be changed. And he felt it was very much a stop-start, you know, what is going on, and we do need a bit of certainty. So I think it's really great that we've got this here. And I think it does show a real direction of travel as well, that we really do want to smarten up this area of town, because it will be quite some years before the overall area is redeveloped. I just wondered whether you could talk about the timescale of doing that when we approve this today.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yes, well, subject to approval today, we have got the contractor teed up really and champing at the bit to get going. So subject to approval, what we will be doing is then finalising the contract with them, letting that contract, and really then the anticipated timescales is that we start the work and have that work completed by the end of the summer. So it can make a difference really, really quickly, subject to us then working around the tenants and what they've got on. So, for example, Southdown Social, like a Tour de France week, where we want to try and work with them, of course, but yeah, we're aiming to press on with that as soon as possible.
Colleagues, any further questions? 8. We have 3 recommendations in front of us. We're being asked to approve an exception to the Council's contract procedure rules in accordance with paragraph 41 to enable a direct award of the contract to Leeds Construction, subject to agreement to carry out the revised scope of works within the approved budget. Authorising the head of programme for Central Winchester Regeneration in consultation with the service leader of legal to arrange for all the necessary agreements for the provider to be entered into on behalf of the council in accordance with Article 14 of the council's constitution, and approving expenditure of up to £301,000 under financial procedure rule 7.4. Right, colleagues, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thank you very much indeed. And the other the last item, I think, on the agenda to talk about is relating to the plans for the Friars Gate site, where there is a proposal to change the plan so that it's a more obvious transition between where we are now and relatively early development of the site, and actually enables that to happen. I think we would all agree that the building needs to come down, but after careful consideration, we have a proposal, about to have a proposal in front of us of change to the meanwhile use versus the proposal for a park, which maybe Ms. Lyons could take us through.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, again, we have consulted and shown and engaged on plans for the Friars Gate site previously, and as the Leader points out, we do want to get that building down. We're in a conservation area, so it's not just a question, a simple question of bringing it down and leaving the site open without plans for what we would do in its place. So we had worked on developing proposals to deliver some open space. This current plan shows what we have currently sitting within our planning application. So we have submitted a planning application following a period of consultation and engagement on what people would like for that space. But again, it would be remiss of us at this stage, bearing in mind it's taken us a while to get here, not to reconsider with regards to the fact that we now know who our development partner is, and they're thinking on where we should probably be concentrating as a council on getting the site prepared and ready for redevelopment, and also bearing in mind reviewing those timescales the level of cost involved in delivering not just the demolition of Friarsgate, but the reprovision of that open space. So we have asked the planners, and I think we touched on this at the previous Regeneration Committee, we have asked the Planning Authority to pause on the determination of our planning application, whilst we then look at the option to bring in an archaeological element to this site, because again, through dialogue with the bidders, not only will we be talking about King's Walk and the best use and the best input that we could put for King's Walk, but what is the best thing that we could do as a council to move along with regards to the Friarsgate site. And I think unanimously all three bidders had said really what we would appreciate. Great to have open space there, but archaeology is something that we would really like to know more about, particularly on that side of the site. So what we've done is we've taken a pause and just looked at how we might bring some archaeology into that site once the building comes down. So you can see on the plan there that we were going to leave the footprint of the building. We're still going to do that. And what we've got here, and again, apologies, the slides are quite small on the screen, but they will be on the website afterwards. We still want to deliver an element of public park to that. So where we've got the slab on the left-hand side of the site, what we're looking to do is propose to do an archaeological dig. So whether it be a shallow dig, which will enable students of the university to join in, whether it be a deeper trench that starts to look about what's under the ground and what damage maybe the slab has inflicted on any archaeological deposits, we're looking to do the archaeology physical works on that northwestern side of the site, on or very close to the slab. So that is a departure from the previous version of the plans, because that was very much going to be landscaped. The middle section of that site, where you can see there at the top, you can see that the sort of U-bend where the river is, that will remain. We're still looking to improve access to the river. We're still looking to provide an element of seating and planting and coffee carts, etc., on that middle portion of the site to keep that public open space look and feel to it. But then on the northeastern side of the site, what we intend to do there is to partner up with the works that we're doing to not only in the bus station, which we're currently out to tender on following the last Regen Committee, is start to maybe bring some public engagement to the site with an element of education to that. So use that northeastern side of the site to start to talk about what the archaeology is, get people involved, do show and tells, etc. So that's the site layout at the moment, which is a third. But linking it all together, it is based on the old street pattern from before. So you can see it was a very linear grid-like pattern, and that's what we want to try and bring into the site, albeit on a very temporary nature, that sort of square grid type approach. Movement through the site is still important, and it's something that the local planning authority have said that they want us to think about and maintain. So we are still maintaining those through routes through the site. And again, we will be absolutely ensuring that there is that accessibility across to improve permeability through to Winnell. And then really at this stage, just trying to give you a flavour of the sorts of things that we're looking at. So as I say, on the left-hand side of the site where we've got the slab, there'll be an element of dig, an element of community involvement in that dig where possible. The middle side, or the middle section of that site, will be the seating and the planting. And then on the right-hand side of the site, where we're looking to do that outreach, there will be the potential to bring in mobile exhibitions, mobile trucks, do events, but also bringing in that archaeological and culture element to it in the short term. So again, it is a very interim proposal. We're not anticipating this to be there for a huge length of time, because I think, as we've touched on before, the development partner is looking as one of the earlier phases to build out the Friarsgate site longer term. So we're trying to get the balance between doing something that enables us to bring down and show change on that site without then fettering what the development partner might want to do going forward in the next two, three years. So it's really just to update you on our thinking. And again, trying to give you an idea on timing. We are asking the archaeological contractor that we've gone out to look at the trenching on the bus station to actually then also be able to factor in the works on Friars Gate. So we've got that already built into and as a bolt on to the tender process that we're currently running. So the archaeology, we've already started those conversations on. We're looking to prepare all the plans and vary the planning application so that that can get submitted and determined within the next month or so. If it does have to go to committee, it's likely that it will be a planning committee in May. We will at the same time look at the works contractor to carry out the works that we need to do. And then of course it will be the demolition. We do need to make sure, and I know we've touched on this before, but we do need to make sure the demolition is done before the bats start to hibernate again in the September, October time. And then once that building is down and the works have been implemented, there will be that ongoing archaeological programme throughout 23, 24 and possibly early 25, depending on when the partner wants to come in and start work on site. So it's a bit of an update. We haven't got all the details there yet, but it's a flavour of what we're trying to do on that site. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Godfrey.
I hope you've seen those slides before, because I couldn't see them from here. I've got perfect vision. They were appalling. They did not. I was not able to see which way up the slides were in terms of whether it was north or south, whether it was what any of the words on the slides were. The contrast using that teal colour is poor. That was shocking. I just could not take anything away from those displays.
Thank you. I can only apologise if you couldn't see the slides clearly on the screen there, Councillor Godfrey. We will make sure you get a copy of that. We're not actually asking you to make any decisions or recommendations today. Sure. So yes, it's not material, but I'm sorry if you couldn't see it.
Absolutely, and I think in light of that, it may be useful for members of this committee if we can have an informal briefing where we're able to see a physical copy of what's being proposed, but separate from any discussion here. And that was any other questions. So clearly that's a bit of a showstopper as far as you're concerned, and I understand your concern. Councillor Edwards.
Just a little bit of clarification. If I heard correctly, the new archaeology that you're proposing was going to be shallow and could involve students, and that feels very different to the kind of archaeology that's proposed for the 4 deep trenches with lots of whatever archaeology high tech is, and public kept at bay. So I just wondered how that difference was going to be communicated and how you were going to make the most for the very interested public we have in the opportunities that you're now presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Yes, it is very different, and it is purposely quite different because we do know that there is a huge interest in archaeology, and by doing a bit of an outreach programme to enable people to come in, it is still very important because it will give us data which we can then feed on to the development partner as we start to plan the site in general. But by doing a slightly shallower trench, looking at the more recent history, it will enable people to get involved, feel involved, and also then go on to learn more about the site through the outreach programme that we're going to be implementing also on that site. The contractors that do the trenching, the deep archaeological works are also very well versed in the slightly more community-based outreach and dig work as well. So it will work very well together, and it will also give us some data that we can work on. We will need to go further down, but it's a very good start if we do that on site at Friars Gate.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you for slides. The point there about the shallower trenches, I think it's developing our knowledge of the archaeology on the site is a very welcome approach, and is, as was said, something which has been called for by many quarters. Will the shallower trenches meet our commitment to doing a full archaeology study on the site, or will we have to do both this new shallower approach dig, and as well as some sampling at a lower level?
Councillor Godfrey, there will need to be further investigations above and beyond the shallow dig, but it will give an indication as to the sort of thing. The dig, if there is a second dig, depending again on what deposits come up from that shallower dig, we are looking at whether there's an option to punch through the slab to see what, and that will be a deeper trench, slightly more bus station type trench. That will be deeper, and that really would be to try and ascertain any damage or what damage has been done by the slab over the years to the archaeological deposits sitting beneath. So the shallow is a stage one, depending on what comes back from that, and longer term, it is likely that we want to then try and do that deeper punch through the trench, to punch through the slab, just to see then what's underneath that. So there will need to be more work longer term, which the development partner may need to do if required by the planning authority.
Any other questions? I have some. Am I allowed some? Yeah. How is this going to work with? Are we just handling through this through our planning archaeology colleagues, or is how will the archaeology advisory panel or other archaeological advisory panel be involved?
Absolutely, Leader. Yes, we've done a very sort of brief outline, which has been done with Tracy Matthews, our archaeologist, and we will be then looking to get an archaeological panel session in. Patrick Ottaway has also been involved in our discussions. So yes, the next step will be to, once we've got a little bit more clarity, to maybe discuss it with them, just to make sure that we're not missing a trick as we go forward.
Any other questions? Any comments on what's being proposed? It's still in a formative stage. So if there are any thoughts or questions that people have, then feel free to make them. And if you don't, feel free not to. Okay, so this is just for information and update. I'm detecting that the basic concept of what's being proposed, which is to say, rather than a park of uncertain duration, we do archaeology that is on the journey towards the hopefully an early planning application. Is that something that broadly people would support? I'm thinking positive responses. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so in terms of positive responses, then I'm very happy with the move to go forward, get the place demolished and look at the archaeology. So the one question I would say is, can we link that archaeology into the meanwhile use area with display boards and so on and information? Is that part of the plan as well, to so that it becomes a whole piece, but in one part of it we're doing the archaeological work, but people understand it, can see it and see what we're finding?
Absolutely, yes. As part of the public interest part of the site, one of the specifications that we will be expecting the contractor who does the work and does the outreach programme will be to provide information boards, and also to keep those updated. So as the story changes, as there's new information coming in, linking that to the work that we've done on the bus station, linking that to previous work that we've done, for example, on the boreholes across the site, and linking that actually to the wider archaeological knowledge that we've got across Winchester itself. So yes, absolutely.
The supplementary, if I may.
Yes.
We talked about King's Walk earlier. I'm not sure if there's any vacant units in there and so on, but I am aware that we are the owners of the building. But if there were opportunity to use any part of King's Walk to display some of the information and items, I'd suggest that's possibly a good use of some vacant space if there is any.
Thank you. That you're right, there isn't at the moment, but yes, it is definitely something that we can bear in mind and factor in as and when appropriate. Thank you.
Any other questions? This, I have the advantage of having the slides on my laptop, as I think now all members of the committee do. When you talk about display space, there's this sort of time truck thing. Is that what we're talking about? We're talking about something that's not a constructed building, but it's something that we would put on site that would enable us to involve people and inform people about the archaeological work that's going on.
I think the idea for that, leader, is we did look at temporary structures on that site. There is an awful lot of issue around there, particularly at the moment with antisocial behaviour and vandalism. So what we wanted to make sure was that anything that was on that site was not going to fall into the same issues that we're having. So bringing dedicated space in and out for set pieces, I think, is the way to go there. But in addition to that, there will be information boards, be it on the boundary wall, be it freestanding. We're going to have to think about how best to portray that. But I think we will get quotes for temporary structures. But thinking now, maybe some of these mobile units are absolutely sort of top range, top notch, and maybe that might be a better way of doing it. We'll see what comes back from the discussions. Maybe with the archaeology panel, they may have a view on that.
That sounds very sensible. Good. Are there any other questions or comments on this presentation? Otherwise, I think I don't think we have any particular thing that we're meant to do other than to thank you for the work. I think he expressed support for the change in direction that's being put forward. I strongly agree with the point that Councillor Westwood made about the need to get the old building down. And I think what's proposed is a much better use of the site, a much more interesting use of the site, and again will help give a sense of forward movement in terms of what we're doing, which is so important at this stage of the project. So thank you very much indeed for all the work you're doing on it, and thank you also to the team that helped you pull that together. Good. Well, that I think means that we have reached the end of everything that's on our agenda. Thank you to the public for attending and listening. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to pass on later, that would be great. Thank you to the officers for all their work in preparing anything. Thank you to fellow cabinet members and councillors for your time and your comments, your very helpful comments, all of which will help move things ahead. And on that happy note, I declare the meeting closed.